Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Coffee with Katie. I got one of those like at-home boba kits because I was kind of craving boba tea, but I didn't want to go get one. So I got these to stash in the fridge when that happens. We're giving it a try today. So today's video is going to be my August reading wrap-up. You know how this goes. We're going to be going over all of the books that I read in August, so let's just get into it. The first book that I was able to read is Holland the Solace by Denali Day. This is book 1 in the Dokiri Bride series. I was able to listen to this on Audible Plus before I canceled my subscription, and I also had it in a physical copy, but I just kind of really wanted to give this a shot because I had heard another booktuber. I cannot think of her name right now, but I'll link her channel down below if I can remember. She talked about this and said it was kind of, maybe she didn't say it was underrated, but she really enjoyed it, and I hadn't really heard anybody else talk about it, and I gave it a shot, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. They are like wyvern riders, and they're kind of this, I don't want to say primitive, but so there's like modern culture where in this time it's like medieval, so like royalty, houses, dukes, you know, all that stuff. But these guys like live in the mountains. They're very isolated. They like hunt and kill their own food. They like do their own stuff. How do you do this? You leave me alone all day and then this? Okay, you can go look. You can look out the window, that's fine. Go ahead. Sorry if you can see Legend. He's once again interrupting my video. But they live kind of isolated from all other people, and they're a tribe, I guess you could say. So they have their own practices, their own culture. It would seem kind of barbaric or primitive to other people. It does seem like that to the girls in this book. But basically they protect the surrounding areas from these, I don't remember what they're called, but they're basically like zombie creatures. And as payment for this, they get to, again, part of their culture, they have to tame a wyvern, and once they do that, they kind of like earn manhood, and then they get to go and steal a bride. They can pick whatever woman they want. So if they're walking down the street, which they're not doing because they have wyverns, if they're flying around and they see a woman and they're like, she's it, she's the one, they will abduct her and they will take her back to the mountain place where they live, and they have to then win them over. And abduction obviously should never happen, but in fantasy romance it can be an interesting trope, and I think the way they did it in this was really interesting. So I did really enjoy it, and I will continue the series because I did find it good, and I love the narrator. He's the same narrator as Elias in An Ember in the Ashes series, and my husband also really likes him. He's a really good narrator, so it was enjoyable. I gave this book 4.5 stars because it really did kind of take me by surprise. I liked it a lot, and like I said, with a lot of fantasy romance there's problematic elements, but if you suspend your disbelief a little bit, it's more enjoyable. There was a lot of slow burn, tension, danger. I did like the wyverns and the wyvern riders and the culture surrounding it, because I guess they're not human, right? So they're a different kind of race, and they are incapable of producing females. So they have to steal brides in order to continue their race. I liked that aspect because it's not just stealing brides and stealing women for the heck of it. It's because if they don't, their race will die out. So that's kind of an interesting aspect of it. One of the main characters, Holland, you're following Holland, and then Jocelyn, the female main character. He was a really sweet and understanding character. You feel for him pretty early on, I think. It was really easy to want him to succeed. Jocelyn was a little hard to get behind at first. I mean, the reason you struggle with it is because you're just like, she's so mean, she's so hateful. But she absolutely should be acting that way, and the way that she did, because she was abducted and forced into a marriage. So even though when you're reading it, you're kind of just like, oh, she's so hateful. It's like, wouldn't you be? I would be. I'd be the worst. I will say that there's not a lot of plot, so I hope the rest of the books have more plot that's not just the relationships. But like I said, I really enjoyed this and didn't really expect to like it so much, but I did. So I am going to continue the series. And sometimes that means continuing the series immediately. Within the first audiobook, if you continued listening to it on Audible, it also let you read Sven the Collector by Denali Day, and this is a prequel story, a little novella, and it is the story of Holland's parents, so it's how they got together. And it was cute. It was a fun little story, nothing super amazing, nothing earth-shattering, but it was enjoyable and a really quick listen, so I gave it 3 stars. You hear about in Holland the Solace that his mother stabbed his father when they were courting, and it talks about that in this book, so you kind of get that background story, so that's a little bit fun, but it's not like the best thing ever. And then I was able to read The Bonesmith, or just Bonesmith, I guess, by Nikki Palpretto. The bone magic was really interesting in this book. I really enjoyed that. It was different than a lot of other books I've read, and the magic was unique for the most part. So Bonesmiths, it's not necromancy, so I struggle. So there are necromantic elements in this, but it's kind of a different subset of the magic. The Bonesmiths themselves, there are these like creatures, you can kind of see it on the cover, but there's these creatures that are like skeletons, or some of them may have some flesh, some of them may not, that are basically like zombies, these mystical creatures that are trying to attack you, and it's because their souls are still attached to the bones. And so the whole idea behind the Bonesmiths is that they go with their special weapons, they cleave the soul, and then it just becomes a pile of bones. The soul is freed, and it's no longer a danger to you. So to become a bonesmith is a very prestigious and powerful thing. And the character, Ren, is trying to become a bonesmith. She's really good at what she does, but when she goes into the final challenge to become a bonesmith, she's sabotaged, and then they're told her that she cannot be a bonesmith. She's stripped of all titles, and she's exiled to a borderland. And I've mentioned this in my reading stats video, but it's kind of similar to when they send Jon Snow to the Wall. It's like nobody wants to be there, and you have to defend the wall from these horrible creatures. So that's kind of the position she's starting out in. And I also like part of the bonesmiths. So there's like bonesmiths, ironsmiths, and I think another one. And the bonesmiths, their irises are white. So it's just basically all white. And I thought that was a really interesting thing, because I've never experienced that where a character's eyes are like that all the time. Like sometimes that happens if they're experiencing magic or like seeing something in the future, but they're like that all the time, and they'll paint black around their eyes, I guess to offset it. And I don't know, it's just really interesting. Then the ironsmiths can like control and bend iron, which is also really cool. It affects their weapons that they use. So a lot of the things that go into the magic system with the different smiths was really intriguing. It doesn't give you a whole lot of detail. It does with the bonesmiths a little, but I would like more of that detail as the series continues. I don't know if it's going to be a duology or a series or what have you, but I do know there's going to be a second book. A lot of the twists and turns I kind of saw coming. As Ren is exiled and she's at the wall, the prince comes to see her to do some stuff. He's like not the first in line, but he's a prince. He gets kidnapped. She's trying to rescue him, and in the midst of all of this, there's a lot of political scheming and betrayal. The prince ends up getting kidnapped, and she ends up teaming up with a ironsmith who's like a sworn enemy of the bonesmiths. They've like exiled the ironsmiths into the borderlands that are dangerous because of some betrayals that happened years ago. And she teams up with him, so they're enemies, and they kind of start seeing the different perspectives that they're bringing to the table, and they're trying to save the prince. And then she learns that things that she has been told may or may not be true, and uncovers more and more. I will say that it seems like the whole first book was mostly just setting things up. The big event that happens, the big twist, the big event, wasn't until like the last hour of the book if you're listening to it. So it's really late when all of that happens. So again, this was a lot of setup, a lot of world building, a lot of setting up the plot for what's going to continue later. I did like it, and I will continue, and I think if the way this book is going and the way the story was flowing, I think I'll like book 2 more, but we will see. I did enjoy this, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I finally was able to read Outlaw Mage by K.S. Veloso, and this is book 1 in the Dagon Puppet Master series. And I did a whole review on this, so I'm not going to touch on this very long, but I did get sent an arc of this. I read it. I really liked it. It was a really fascinating world. There's a lot of like colonization and race topics that are touched on that are important, but also really good and interesting the way everything's playing out. There was some gruesome aspects. There was a lot of things in this book. I think if you like this author's works at all, you will like this. I mean, I've never read The Chronicles of the Wolf Queen, but I really liked this. The main character is not very likable, as in she's very reclusive and she's very apathetic, and she doesn't really want to care about those around her because she knows that will hurt her or put her in danger. So she kind of is like a, I have to save myself and no one can get close to me type of a human. But you kind of get why she's like that. I don't know, it was very interesting, and you can look at my review for more of my thoughts on this, but I gave this 4 stars. I'm very thankful that the author sent me an advanced copy, and I can't wait to read book 2. The next book I read is A Heart So Fierce and Broken by Bridget Kemmerer. This is book 2 in the A Curse So Dark and Lonely series, or the Cursebreaker series? The Cursebreaker series. Obviously I can't go into this book a whole lot because it is a sequel. I was a little nervous because I've heard some people that loved book 1 didn't like book 2, and I think that is flipped for me. I think I actually really did like book 2, and somebody said I would because I really like Gray as a character. This is basically Gray's story. It's following Gray and then another character's perspective that you don't have in the first book. So her perspective is established, and then you're following Gray as well, and that's basically the whole book. I liked the book, and I get a whole lot of Gray, which I like, but I'm not sure I like where the story is going, which also tracks because I've heard people not like how the series ended or the 3rd book. It felt a little weird for the characters, and some of it gets explained like at the very end of the book, but some of it I was like, why is this character acting like this? It doesn't seem like them, something seems off, it's weird. There's a reason it's weird, and I don't know if I like it. So I have some conflicting opinions in my mind and heart about this book, but I have to read book 3 to know what happens, and hopefully I don't hate it. Overall, I will continue, and I did like this one, but we'll see. I gave A Heart So Fierce and Broken 3.5 stars. And then I read A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab because I was trying to get through the Darker Shade of Magic series before Threads of Power came out, and I have. But I liked this one more than the first one, and I wasn't as confused as last time. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why I struggled to follow along with the first book, but I didn't have that issue with this. And I was trying to like think back and was like, is it the writing? Did the writing change, or was my mindset just not in it at the time? And I really don't know, but I had a much easier time following this and getting into it, and it was fun, enjoyable. I really like Lila and the kind of pirate aspects that get into it as well. Obviously, I love Cal and Rye and all those fun characters. This is also kind of where the big bad villain comes into play, which was terrifying. It was really good, and I really liked the competition aspect with the different mages. That was cool. I liked that. And I had to pick up book 3 immediately after that cliffhanger and was just hoping for a good finish out. So I gave this book 4 stars. That being said, I then read A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. This is the last book in the Shades of Magic series, and I immediately picked up this book because of the horrible cliffhanger, like I said. And overall, I liked this series. I thought it was wrapped up really well, and I'm curious to see how the new stories emerge and if it connects at all. I know it's supposed to connect a little bit, but how it connects, how it plays into the overall world in the Threads of Power series. But I think, strangely, I liked book 2 the most, which is weird because I feel like that's not usually the case. I feel like you like book 1 or you like book 3 or whatever, but I like book 2. This one is fine, but it was a lot of stuff and a lot of hard things and sad things. There was like plots that fell through. There was just a lot of things going on. However, V.E. Schwab doesn't really disappoint. And I'm looking forward to continuing what she writes because it seems like there's 2 types of V.E. Schwab people. It's the ones that like very certain ones of her books. So they like Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, but they don't like Vicious. Or they like A Darker Shade of Magic, but they don't like things like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Or they like Gallant, but they don't like her adult works. Like, there's just so many different avenues you can go. Or they like Vicious, but nothing else, you know? I feel like everything I've read from V.E. Schwab, I've enjoyed. Has every single book been a favorite? No. But she wrote my favorite book ever, Vicious. So, I will continue. I still need to play a little bit of catch up in some of the things she's written, like, what's it called? This Savage Song, like that duology. I still need to read that, but I did enjoy this overall. I'm curious to see her writing Threads of Power now that she's written all of this other stuff and become more established as an author. I'm curious to see how that plays out. But I did like this. I gave this one 3.5 stars. And then last but not least, I read Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. This is a Rapunzel retelling, and I really, really loved Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. So I was like, yes, T. Kingfisher, yes, I think it was also like a Rapunzel Sleeping Beauty retelling. I was like, yeah, sounds great. And this book was fine. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was certainly not bad. I really enjoyed the twist of the story, like how she took these retellings and twisted it and made it something else. And there was gruesome elements and interesting elements and funny elements. And it made it more dark, gruesome, scary. Main character you're following who's like a toad-shaped heroine is how she's described. It's just funny. They both talk about how she's not attractive. The prince that ends up helping her, or no, not the prince, the knight that ends up helping her also says he's not attractive. Like, those elements were kind of fun and refreshing. And I really like this author and the way that she can twist and turn the stories and just make them very interesting and unique. I look forward to reading more from her. This wasn't my favorite just thing that she's written because I've only read a couple of things. I will continue to read more from her. This was just okay. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. It was enjoyable. But essentially, the toad-shaped heroine, she was raised, they were changelings and she was raised by fairies. And because of that, her human appearance has changed into something more fae-like, as in not cute, like swamp person. And the fairy changeling that was like raised as a human, she went to go bless them and ended up botching the blessing, like the fairy godmother that comes to bless, or like Maleficent that comes to bless. She ends up botching the blessing and makes her unrepentant about all life. So she has a disregard for all life. So she'll kill anything and think everything's fine. And she becomes like a danger to society, and they put her to sleep and put her in this tower. And this knight comes in thinking a curse needs to be broken, and she's trying to make sure the curse is never broken. So it's a really interesting dynamic. That was probably a little bit more spoilery than it should be, but I kind of want you to know what that is going into it because it's interesting. So it was cool. I'm glad I read it. Not the best thing ever. Well, those are all the books that I was able to read in August. If there's any books that you read in August that you would love to tell me about, I would love to know. Leave it down in the comments and I will check them out. And as always, I would love to hear any suggestions you have of videos you would like to see. I know I don't say that all the time, but if there's something you've been really wanting me to do or to see me do, just let me know and I will try to do it for you. I'll try to film it and figure it out. But as for now, that is it for today's video. Please like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time. Stay safe and caffeinated. Bye.